So next we're going to do an exercise called the elements of light and shade, and this is actually going to be a diagram for us that we can work off of. So by the end of this you'll have a nice shaded sphere. So it can either look like this where you don't blend anything, or you can blend using your paper towel to make things look a little smoother, and I'll demo how to do that. So again, today we're going to need your shaded pencils. Make sure they're nice and sharp, so your 4 and your 6. I'm going to use a paper towel to help me, one of my sharper erasers, and then my kneaded eraser. And to start this out, you're going to be sketching a sphere or a circle. And if you have a hard time with sketching a sphere, you can use something that's round, like this masking tape, and just get the outside of it. So I'm going to freehand a circle kind of quickly. And when we decide to shade something, we want to figure out where the light is coming from. That's called the light source. I'm going to say mine's poking out from this top left corner. And if you think of a sphere, the very bottom of your sphere is going to be touching the ground, and that's going to be a dark area, and that's where your shadow comes out of. And your shadow is like a stretched out version of whatever shape you are, whatever silhouette you have. So a stretched out circle is going to be an ellipse shape. So going at this kind of angle, I'm gonna draw in a very simple ellipse shape. And I don't really want any super dark outlines today. So just sketch your outlines out and then lighten them up. So that's going to be our basic shape for today. Now when we shade things, the light is going to tell us a lot of stuff. So the light is going to hit this sphere about here, and since the sphere is round, it's going to create a round light for it. And our shadows are also going to be rounded. So a lot of people like to start their shading down here at the bottom, but that actually isn't very helpful for us. And I'll explain why a little bit later. So you're going to make this curved shadow a little bit higher than the edge. And from that point, we're going to treat this kind of like a gradient that goes from lighter to darker. So I'm going to expand on this shadow that curves. Again, it curves because this is a sphere, so we're showing that it's round. And we're going to treat this shape like the moon, so it's going to keep growing, and it's a little bit heavier in the middle. So just keep building around that initial line that we drew, and let that line fade away. We're going to go around this spot that we think is going to be light. I'm not going to draw where to stop. I'm just going to slowly fade it away. Since I'm using my paper towel, I can be a little lighter handed and a little bit more carefree when I'm doing this. And I'll just use my paper towel very carefully later to blend things in together. So I'm using the side of my pencil to cover a lot of area very quickly. And we really want to make sure that the darkest part is down there, but not all the way to the edge. If you aren't planning on blending with your paper towel, then you want to do this a little bit more carefully. All right, so that looks pretty good now. I'm going to take my paper towel again. I'm going to kind of fold it up into a nice stump for myself. And I'm going to start where it's lightest. And I'm going to go in small circular shapes and then kind of mimic that smile or that moon shape, that crescent shape that we were doing earlier, to avoid this light area. You want it to very slowly go from light into dark. So slowly get into the darks. Don't press so hard once you're there, and just kind of bring it all around. And And so what might happen is your ball might get a little bit blurry, which is fine. And then over here, it might not be as dark as you want it to be. So I am gonna go in again and add another layer to make it a little bit darker. Again, I wanna make sure that it gets a little heavier in the middle and then it tapers off on the side. So it gets a little thinner on the sides. I don't want this to happen so suddenly though, that I can tell that I just drew something extra in there. So I still want to take my paper towel, especially around the edges, and blend those in together. Like that. And if there's any areas that get really messy, so let's say this happens to you and your light spot kind of goes away, it's not the end of the world. All you need to do is take your gummy eraser, your kneaded eraser, and just treat it like a regular eraser and erase out where you think it should be the lightest. Go in with my other one just to make it even brighter. And so between here and here, I can tell there's kind of like a harsh difference. So I'll go back in with the clean part of my paper towel and scrub right in between those areas. So that'll smooth them out a lot nicer. Okay, so I have a very blurry looking sphere right now. So this is where you take your actual eraser and you're going to go all around the edges. You shouldn't have to press very hard. In fact, if you press too hard, your eraser might leave some smudge marks that you'll have to deal with later. So lightly use your eraser. Anytime you have to use it too hard, it's going to leave some marks for you that aren't very nice. So sharpen it out by lightly going over with your eraser. And that's a pretty clean sphere. Next, what you're going to do is deal with the shadow. And so right under the sphere is the darkest part of it. It's going to be almost black because when an object touches another object, you see that no light can really get in. We barely see that kind of darkness. So right under, it'll be pretty dark. And then all shadows are going to look a little bit different just depending on the lighting. So if the light is soft, then your shadows will be soft. If your light is kind of harsh, then you might get some darker shadows, some sharper ones as well. So think about your shadows when you're in a room with a bunch of lights all over the place, or when you're outside in the sun. And you'll see kind of a difference there. So I'm gonna let mine fade a little bit. And then very carefully going around just the bottom part because I don't want to get into my sphere that's already nicely shaded. I'm gonna go in with my paper towel again. And you can let your shadow be sharp, you can let it be a little bit blurrier. A little bit blurrier is a little bit more natural, but if you want to say this has super harsh lighting, then of course you can take your eraser and you can make it a little bit more sharpened. Like that. So, up to you. Try to keep your shadow from having a harsh outline. If it has an outline like that, it'll look a little bit strange. So you really want to get rid of any outlines, any parts that look darker than they need to be. Because objects don't have harsh outlines in nature. So there you go, you have a nice sphere. The last thing we're going to do is take this and we're going to give it a background to let it pop out a little bit more. So you can take a straight edge and just go create a line behind it. Doesn't need to be perfect. And what I see people do when they have their backgrounds is they'll kind of go like this and then try to smudge it in. That won't look very nice because, like I said, it'll just make it like a blurry line, so that doesn't really do very much. What other people do is they like to go right next to the sphere, and they leave all this space, and that creates this weird glowing effect. So what you actually need to do is go right up against your sphere, or whatever object you're adding a background to, and almost like you're outlining it, but not quite as harsh. You're gonna make sure you go right up to that edge, and then you can bring that value out a little bit more even. So really go all the way around and then outwards. And I don't want to just go around it, because then it's kind of like I'm giving this sphere a wig. Some weird hair. And I want to be a little bit darker so it stands out from all those grays that I have, because I have a lot of nice middle values in there. So not too dark, not too light. The background can actually be fairly dark if you want it to be. Next, again, I'm going to go in really carefully around the edge of this thing, because I don't want to get inside of the sphere. And then I can relax a little bit once I'm towards the outside of that edge that I want to keep clean. So again, go right up against the edge. It's really nice if you have like a nice point to your paper towel. Some people like to use these guys, but I don't particularly like them unless it's for details. So I'm just gonna stick to this and work with my control on it. And there you go. The next part is going to be labeling this with notes.